What's up everyone, it's Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month and Wong Fu is partnering up with the Identity Concert Series powered by Infiniti to celebrate our community heroes, especially the ones that have inspired us to take on life in style. I recently wrote a book with co-authors Jeff Yang and Phil Yu specifically to honor and preserve the stories of various heroes in our community for the next generation. So follow us behind the scenes to see how this book came to be and stick around to after the video so you can honor a hero in your life. Enjoy!
Rise came about first and foremost out of the conversations that Phil and Philip and I had independently and sometimes together about this big gap in kind of our collective memory, the 3 decades in which the three of us grew up, but somehow get eluded from the conversation when people talk about the journey of Asian America.
So in 2018, a little film called Crazy Rich Asians came out, and it was a wonderful movie that completely changed the game for Asian American representation in Hollywood. But I just remember at the time, there were a lot of headlines. Basically every headline was saying how it was the first movie in 25 years with an all Asian cast. I just remember thinking like, dude, that makes us sound like we haven't done anything for 25 years, that it was just Joy Luck Club, and then we were just hanging out, and then Crazy Rich Asians happened. It just made me really sad that, man, like mainstream has completely, overlooked a lot of this stuff.
It had been a minute since we'd really taken stock of kind of the milestones of where we're going, how we got here. I think we really felt like there was this need to really capture the history of Asian America.
And we realized that if we didn't actually tell that story, maybe nobody would.
The reason why we chose these decades is because the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, I would say is when Asian Americans really became comfortable in who we were.
I mean, the other thing is these 3 decades were when a group of people were coming of age, coming out into the workforce, graduating from college, who were kind of the first generation of people to be called Asian American all of their lives.
The central question is, who gets to tell our stories? Who is allowed to tell it? And when is it our turn to tell it,
There was just so much that we were creating on our own, and we just wanted to make sure that everyone knew all the work and all the amazing things that were happening in our community. By putting it in a book, it would never be forgotten, and we would always remember what was being done to kind of get us to where we are today.
The subtitle of Rise is A Pop History of Asian America from the 90s to Now. And I think a lot of people tend to think pop history means, oh, a history of popular culture. And it is, in the sense that we cover a lot of entertainment, media, technology shifts, stuff like that. But we actually feel like pop stands for popular history of Asian America. That means that it's not just about what we created and what we consumed, but really about who we were, how we lived our lives over these 3 decades.
Sometimes you don't know that history is something that you're living, right? When you're going through it, you don't really realize that this is going to be something that gets documented or canonized in a book. But that's actually what we're trying to do here. We lived through this, and these were moments where we rose up and we came to prominence and we were building something.
The task of deciding what went into the book was enormous, and I can't say that I would necessarily recommend the path we took as the best way, but it might have been the only way.
So a lot of this book was written over Zoom. The 3 of us doing some late night conversations, transcripts, Google Sheets. We had this amazing opportunity to just say like, all right, if we're telling the story of Asian America, what goes in it? Who gets to be in this book and what events are important to us?
Obviously, 3 East Asian straight guys, 2 of which are named Phil. There wasn't much diversity within the, the authors. So we made a very conscious decision to bring in as many contributors from a diverse background and diverse perspectives to help us fill out what should be in the book.
If you wanted to tell the story of Asian Americans over these 3 decades, what did you need to include in there? Well, that list was super long, right? And we're a diverse community. So every time we reached out to people who didn't look like ourselves, who weren't from our background, we got more and more topics added to the list.
It didn't necessarily have to be our experience, but we, if we knew that this was important to a certain group of people within our community, we wanted to put that in there.
We wanted to be as complete as possible, knowing that we're never really going to be complete.
And by the end, I guess we had a book.
In this book, we not only cover a lot of the bright and celebratory things that happen in our community, but we also cover some of the dark parts too, so that we never forget. For example, the killing of Vincent Chin, how 9/11 affected the South Asian community. We talk about the K-Town riots. We also talk about, like Yellowface, and we talk about some of the disgrations that happened over these last 30 years. So we wanted to find this balance of positive inspiration, but also reminders of mistakes we never want to make again.
I've got to say my favorite piece in the book is Stuff Asians Like, where we asked people to share the non-Asian things that feel most Asian to them, even though they're not actually ours, right? Brands, products, even ideas that Asian Americans have adopted as part of our experience as Asians in America.
One of my favorite pieces in the book is getting to interview MC Jin, who was kind of a trailblazer in his own right on Freestyle Friday, 106 in Park, where he won 7 rap battles in a row. Everyone who knows hip hop knows that that was kind of a historic feat for anybody, but for an Asian rapper, like monumental. We got to talk to him and take him through all 7 rap battles, sort of Michael Jordan, Last Dance style, watch the footage and give commentary. That was just a blast.
We have so many great pieces in it. We have a piece about Asian American animation characters. That was really important. Oh my God, we have a piece about Asian Americans in YouTube. We have 2 pieces actually about the prominent Asian Americans that were part of that amazing YouTube bubble. We have a piece about Asian Avenue. Do you guys remember Asian Avenue? If you don't, you're too young for this video, perhaps. No, just kidding.
One of the reasons why we chose to use comic art in so many places is because we felt like it was one of the ways in which we could bring these stories to life, not just for people of our own age, but for younger generations. And in so many ways, comics were how we learned stuff ourselves.
This is an amazing book. There's so much that we covered, but also so much that we didn't. And that's actually what I think is the most important thing about this book, is that we just want it to start conversations, to let people know that, hey, there's so much to our community and our culture that there's still more to tell. And this is just kind of like a place to start.
A community hero is someone who recognizes that they are part of something that's greater than themselves, that we're working towards something that makes us better, aspires for more, and really works towards that in the capacity that they have.
I think a community hero doesn't necessarily have to be recognized by mainstream. Honestly, it just needs to be someone that influences another person or a group of people to make their community better. And so that's actually why the book, I feel like, is very balanced in the sense that, yes, we celebrate big stars, CEOs and founders and politicians that made a huge, huge impact on a grand scale, but we also talk about smaller community leaders that led the way for their own little subgroup. And those people are just as important because of the impact that they made to the people around them.
I think a community hero is somebody who doesn't necessarily have to be selfless. There are times when you can stand up and defend yourself and in the process stand for something bigger. Nevertheless, feel like you're doing something that you know is going to have ripple effects that extend much greater than where you stand.
Growing up, some of the heroes that I looked up to, oh my God, I mean, I guess technically he's not Asian American, but I was just such a big fan, and just seeing any Asian face in an American movie theater was so impactful. So I gotta shout out Jackie Chan when he came out in America with Rumble in the Bronx, and then subsequently with Rush Hour. That was such a huge inspiration for me to just see an Asian face on screen.
This is an obvious one, but I'm gonna shout out Jeremy Lin. I think a lot of us take ownership of Linsanity in that moment because it meant so much, and it was a moment of just joy. It really made you believe that anything was possible.
One of the hardest events that occurred as we were finishing the book was the passing of a friend of ours, a photographer named Corky Lee, who often styled himself the unofficial Asian American photographer laureate. Corky was everywhere. He went to every event, documenting every aspect of our emerging community from the 60s onward to his untimely passing earlier last year. No one has probably influenced my career more than Corky.
We actually dedicated this book to those who come next, because this book really is for the next generation. Obviously, it's great nostalgia for the people that lived through it, but really we want the next generation just to know and to be able to see how we got to where we are today.
I hope more than anything else, this book serves as kind of a bridge between a generation that grew up still really doubting who we were, not fully feeling comfortable in this country or even in our own skin.
And I hope that future generations read the book and kind of recognize that they are part of history.
By the time Hudson and his generation have come along, the world has changed a lot. This is a different environment from the one we grew up in. They may not know where all this came from.
American history does a really good job of excluding a lot of groups, including Asian Americans. This is our chance to reclaim some of that and make up for lost time.
There's so much richness and nuance in the history of Asian Americans here. And ultimately, I hope reading all these stories will inspire the next generation of community heroes.